met my mom when they were students at Michigan State University, where Mom was an undergrad and Dad was in vet school. In 1951, they married and moved to Indiana, where he began his career as a vet. After 3 years, they moved east, where he became a professor of animal science and pathology at the University of Rhode Island. There he stayed until his retirement in the mid-1980s. When we were children in the 50s and 60s, he would share his work, a menagerie of live animals, with my brother Victor, my sister Dorothy, and me. In Dad's lab, we learned to look through a microscope, draw pictures of what we saw, and watch for any movement signifying life. Our favorite activities as children, though, involved the university's farm. On Saturdays, Victor and I went with Dad to the barns. We watched the cows be milked, we collected eggs from the chickens, or played hide and seek in the hay stall. In summer, he took us to the county fair, an annual high point in the state famous for breeding the Rhode Island Red. Because Dad was the state's vet, we children got in the fairgrounds several days early. We helped Dad examine the animals, give shots, and roam the stalls, stirring up the animals and coaxing them with treats. In our family, Easter was more like Christmas, as we were often presented with a live Easter bunny from the lab. I could pretend the rabbit was a baby, swallowing it and pushing it around in my carriage, showing off to the neighbor kids. For about a month, we doted on the rabbit, feeding it, giving it water, and cleaning its cage. Somehow, Dad could always sense when our interest waned. Like magic, the rabbit would become mysteriously ill and be returned to the lab. Crabbing was one of our favorite Rhode Island activities. In Dad's lab, we'd collect smelly chicken parts for bait lines. We'd don our sneakers, douse ourselves with insect repellent, and head to the salt marsh in the changing tide. Dad taught us to drop the bait lines and watch for them to become taut, a signal that crabs were biting. The tricky part was reeling in the line and netting the crabs before they escaped. We learned netting crabs required stillness and keeping quiet, a difficult lesson for excited school-age children. Our cousins remember what fun we kids had crabbing with Dad, and then covering the picnic table with newspaper to eat. Dad could turn potentially onerous activities into a memorable learning experience. In the 1970s, carving turkey for Thanksgiving dinner was men's work. Dad had the advantage over other men because he knew how a turkey came together. How bones and muscles and tendons work to create movement. Once when my husband Bob and I were first dating, Bob joined us for Thanksgiving dinner. He offered to help Dad carve the turkey, and soon the two were off to the kitchen. Bob learned the parts of the turkey, the names of the key bones, and how to surgically cut off a bird. But what he remembers today is that if you keep the bird intact and pull on one specific tendon, you can make the wings of a cooked bird move as if it is. When we children had our own families in the 1980s and 90s, Dad and Mom would accompany us on family ski vacations. They would lend a hand in babysitting, cooking, and shepherding their 6 grandchildren spanning 8 years in age. When not skiing, they would spend a day with Grandpa at the library for story time, McDonald's for Happy Meals, and the heated jacuzzi for a swim. Dad dedicated his life caring for others and helped many, but had a soft heart for foreign students, fishermen, and farmers. Dad and Mom were active in the University International Club and served as second parents for many Chinese students. These students loved having someone to talk to in their native tongue, and our dad fast became everyone's surrogate father. Upon graduation, a few students married, and my sister and I have many stories of being the flower girls for the weddings of these adopted siblings. About halfway through Dad's career at the university, he began studying fish diseases and became an important friend to the Rhode Island fishermen. His advice kept the fishermen's catch free from disease or spoiling. As thanks, Dad often received a sampling of the day's catch. Soon, smoked bluefish became his signature dish for potlucks and parties. I grew up hearing about Dad's veterinarian practice in Indiana and how he often saved farmers from bankruptcy. For farmers who depend on farming to provide a sustainable life, their vet is key to survival. However, many farmers couldn't afford pay to help or protect their animals. My dad often provided treatment or accepted foreign goods, such as milk and eggs, for his services. Dad was a passionate student, curious about science and medicine, philosophy and religion, and music. My husband Bob's earliest encounter with Dad were as a student at URI, not his son-in-law. However, this role changed after Bob and I married and moved to Washington, D.C. in the late 1970s. Dad loved to visit us, and especially to spend a day in Bob's lab, which was very different from his own lab. Although both labs were involved in the life sciences, Dad's was in a university setting, pursuing knowledge for the sake of discovery. And Bob's was in a commercial setting, pursuing results to provide a service. After a day at Bob's lab, Dad would return home with new thoughts about the role of science and the meaning of being a scientist. And so it was that while most people visit Washington, D.C. to see the museums and monuments, Dad came to see our workplaces. I work for the American Society for Microbiology, a professional society that sponsors conferences and trainings. For 25 years, Dad joined me at many meetings, even after his retirement. He enjoyed keeping current in science and loved meeting students and other scientists. Each year, I'm responsible for a conference that pulls together about 3,000 college students, gives them an opportunity to prepare for graduate and medical school. The days are very long, starting with breakfast at 7 a.m. Once, a colleague stopped me to say, "I've seen it all. It's 9 p.m. and your dad is still one of the last persons sitting in a session on preparing for the medical school entrance exam." How old did you say he was? At the time, Dad was 85. Dad was interested in and learned from all our careers. Over time, he attended shuttle launches and met astronauts with my sister, who has been with NASA for over 20 years, or watched from afar traders on the Chicago Stock Exchange with my brother, who made a career in the financial industry. In retirement, Dad took up singing and playing the recorder. He sang in this church choir for over 20 years and shared with us fine memories of music, practices, performances, and friends. He also started a recorder group with 3 others when he moved to his retirement community. The oldest was 95 years old, and the youngest, 88. Curious, humble, and grateful to others, Dad always strove to do better and learn more. Dad's grace and humor, his welcoming nature, his curiosity, and his openness to people and to new experiences are an inspiration for me. He was kind, patient, and caring to all who knew him.